Good morning. We continue the review, the conclusion of Ayin Beis, Hemshech Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are middle of page 1418. Discussing the channels, what we call oisius, that carry from one level to the next. And we've been going literally in a process from the bottom up. Oisius hadibur, and below that oisius hamaisa, written letters, the spoken letters, more tangible than less tangible, the letters of thought, and that there are two levels, chitzenius hasechel, pnimius hasechel, both in bina, and understanding and comprehension. So there are kelim. The question is whether the kelim are more sublime, as they are in thought, and only to yourself, not to another, and which of course is interdependent, because when it's more subtle, it's not expressible really, whereas dibur, there's more defined letters, so someone else can hear them. And then there's pnimius hasechel, which is where the letters are not murgoshim. You don't even sense them. They're not discernible, even though they're there. Then higher than that is chachma, where there he said it's not only not discernible, it's also not nicker. They've not yet really gotten full definition. I say the word full, he doesn't say those words full, he just says they're not a mitzias, they're not the ein nikorin, because they're not a mitzias ba'atzman. So it's not just in relation to the person who's contemplating on the idea that you don't feel the letters themselves are not yet fully formed, because chachma is still above, even though there's a keli, but it's really hovers above the keli, as he explained earlier. That's chachma. And I have to correct myself, because I read a certain line a certain way, and I read too much into it, to be honest. I want to just correct it going back. The line that we're in this 3-6. The 8th line from the top of the page, 1418, where it says, I read it that he's giving an example. He's comparing Chachma to the way it is in Koiches Hagluyim, with his levels, and the Koiches one higher than the next. I didn't read it correctly. It's supposed to be read like this. And just as it was in the revealed Koiches that we just spoke about, Bina, Dibur, Machshava, Bina, Chachma, so too, and the distinct levels, one higher than the next, like we just discussed. He's now moving to Keiches and Elam. So I just wanted to make that small correction. And Keiches and Elamim, now we go to the Keiches that are higher than Chachma, and namely Ratzon and Taanug. He began with Ratzon, that the Keiches and Elamim, you have to say, since there's a Gilui, Koyach, that has to be Alidei Eisius Kaneda. However, the letters there in the Keiches Nalam are higher than the Keiches Gluyim. The Keiches Gluyim, the letters are either tangible, like in speech, less tangible, or more sublime or more subtle in thought, not recognizable in the inner seichel, or not nikodim, meaning have not been fully defined in Chachma. But they're letters. Here, he says they're higher than the Keiches Gluyim, because the Keiches Alam are generally beyond Kelim, as we discussed yesterday at length what that means. They're not localized and they're not manifest in a particular function. Ratzon is a Ratzon for anything. You can want to walk, you can want to talk, you can want to eat, you can want to think. And the same thing with Taanug. So Slamaylam Kelim, but therefore the Kelim and the Asius there are not Mitzias Asius. So by Chachma, he didn't say there was a. By Chachma, he said the word which means that they themselves are not yet a mehusa mitzias in the full sense. Here, he says they're not a mitzias. You have to say he means that on even a higher level. As I explained yesterday, that there's a relative situation of mitzias. As he continues, that it's the outer ratzon, because it's more melubish, it's more manifest. As he explains, There, the Asis are Metzias Yeser. So again, you have to understand it as process. Like we spoke about the cellular development in a fetus, how it goes from one cell and splits into two, or other examples we discussed, that essentially in Metzias itself, we're talking about an evolutionary process. So there it's Metzias Yeser, and he said the difference between Ratzon, Pnimis and Chetzenis HaRatzon. Pnimis HaRatzon is Negei Etzem Nafshei. Not just he needs it as a means to something else, but it's not that that itself is what his Etzem Nefesh wants. And being that's the case, you sense they're more discernible, the letters. Because those definitions of that, because we're not talking about the end, but the means, like I said, building a home. I say, what's your desire? I want to build a home. What kind of home? So you could describe it to some extent. When you're talking about why it's negated to you, why do you need a home for your family or for deeper reasons? There, you don't. There, the oyer is much more powerful, as he explains in a minute. Nirgish yesera oyer, the ena is nirgashim. Whereas the chitzein is the levush hamal b'shasaratzin is. Now, I pointed out that here you see the words nirgashim was what was used earlier in bina, and chachma was nikarin. They're not discern. They're not. Nirgashim means you don't feel them, you don't sense them, you don't discern them. But chachma, it's not yet defined even. So you have to say that what he said before about bina and chachma is in the Keiches Nelamin, where it's less mitzias itself. There's also a relative nirgashim. You either sense it or you don't sense it, like he says in the Panimius Haratzim. So he's not repeating the words; he's just explaining the same idea on a more sublime and more subtle level. And that's where we stopped. Now he's going to move to Taanug, which is even higher than Ratzon. And again, to sum up why he's going through this, we'll soon see the nimshal, the lesson, the moral that we learn from this. But it's pretty obvious that what he's doing here is showing us that when you contemplate on each of these levels, this is part of the journey of trying to understand and integrate a higher divine presence, called a divine unity, Amayirach be'echad, right? Which is b'chol kavanose, the kavana of Amayirach be'echad, to see the divine unity in everything. Because unity, the deeper you go into unity, the less details there are. That's exactly what unity is. On the other hand, God wants an existence filled with details. So he wants us to integrate that in the world of details, where there are kalim and there are oisius, we should come to understand that the kalim oisius are really carriers of a deeper power. So like we're going to learn a little later about Shmoi. Shmoi is God's name, but it's God's name in oisius. So he's giving it already some definition, depending on the level, of course, we're talking about definition, that itself evolves. That Shmoi, when you say Hashem Echad or Shmoi Echad, that the Shmoi will help lead us to the divine unity within the Shem, which is actually one with God. Like we said, all it is a reflection of the Etzem. Shmoi does not add or subtract anything, but it does manifest it. So essentially, this process that we're learning here is the process of discovering unity, Devah Hashem Echad, within the diversity of all of existence. But you go step by step. You start with Dibur, understanding that existence is God's words. But that I don't want to jump. We're going to get to that in the next page when he starts talking about how it is Lamaila. Here he's still discussing it, as I explained, this Chabad in a language that we can relate to our faculties, so we can have something to relate to. If it was just discussed in the abstract on the level of godliness, it'd be harder to understand. This gives us real life examples, or more than examples, manifestations of these different levels, because all of us have all these levels within us. We have the written word, the spoken word, the thought words, the words of thought, and all those, and the levels there, Chachma and Aratzen, Pnimius, Chitzenius, and Pnimius Aratzen. And now we'll move to the next higher level, Taanug. And from there to Etzem HaNefesh. So we're going to see here all the levels covered, all the three levushim, Maisa, Dibra, Machshava, all the koiches, the faculties, the revealed faculties, hidden faculties, and all the way from Ratzon to Taanug, and then all the way to Etzem HaNefesh, as we'll get to shortly. Okay. So learning inside, we continue about halfway down the page, the line near Goshen. Ubekoyach HaTaanug. We're going to go to Taanug.
Etzem and HaNefesh even higher than Taanug?
What do you think?
I think yes.
Yeah, you guessed right. The language itself tells you that, no? Yeah. Okay. So the page, we're in the middle of the page, 1418, and if you want to follow the text, it's at ayinbeis.com. Ubekoyach HaTaanug. You mentioned before Keiches and Lomim. He said those are Ratzon and Taanug. But he only discussed Ratzon so far, the outer and inner desire. Now he's going to say Keicha Taanug, Hagam Shegam Sham Yesh Asius. The power of, the best definition for Taanug that we have is pleasure, the light. But as you can see, or see here, and we see in general, the word pleasure and will for Ratzon or desire are pretty inadequate, because what does that even mean? You need to always explain. Ratzon and Taanug are one of the more, let's call it elusive concepts or faculties that need good explanation what they are, and especially what's the difference between them. So he's going to give a little explanation here. In Samach Vav and Vayichulu and a few of the Mamorim there he talks about it more at length. I'll try to, if need be, I'll draw from there as well. So he's going to talk about it. He says, Koyach HaTaanug, Hagam Shegam Sham Yesh Asius. How do you know we have Asius? Because he said every Gilui is, he said before, every Gilui, what was the law? Kol Gilui Koyach de Asius. So there's a Gilui Koyach is through letters. If there's no Gilui Koyach, okay, then it's concealed and it remains dormant or latent within the entity. But if there's a Koyach, a Gilui, there's Asius. Because like we said, Asius doesn't necessarily mean expressive letters, it means expression, period. So it's not necessarily pronouncing Aleph, Beis, Gimel, but it's the idea that there's a channel of expression, as we discussed at length. Like especially when you're talking about Atzmos, built in Metzias Nimtza, is definitely not Asius and no Gili altogether. Beyond, once it comes into some form of manifestation that Hashem wants, and even the word want may not be the right word, but Hashem chose to manifest in some way, so that right away creates Shmoi, which is Asius, like we said earlier. So Taanug for sure, he says, Hagam yesh Asius, avol einim nikarim klal. And here you see what he used before with Bina and Chachma, Nikarim and Nergoshim, he's using the same thing here. By Ratzon, he said, Ein Nergoshim, in the previous Ratzon, and in the Taanug, he's saying, Ein Nikarim. So it's not redundant. It's on the higher level. There's also, relatively speaking, two levels. One that you don't discern it, but it's there. And the other is not nikr. But it's still there because every gili has to have Asius. Now he's going to explain what's the difference between Ratzon and Einig. Okay, so let's read inside and then we'll discuss it a bit more. The Ratzon ubchinas is pashtus v'gili HaNefesh. So Ratzon is considered to be, like he used the word merutza some places, that it's a extension and a revelation, a gili, an expression from the nefesh. No, in other words, a nefesh is without Ratzon, the nefesh is an entity, but with Ratzon, it is able to express itself and spread itself out. So Ratzon means, I want, let's say, to have a home. That Ratzon is already an extension. The nefesh, for whatever reason, because God created us in a way that ein adam b'loi bias, that a human being is not complete without a home. So the nefesh has an innate longing for that. Ratzon is its ability to go ahead and express that to the point of fulfilling it. If the Ratzon would never be neseder, if there was no arousal, there was no stimulation of a Ratzon, like we've discussed in the previous classes, that Ratzon to have that need to have a home can remain dormant your entire lifetime. Ratzon is the expression of something. I want this. Obviously, there's many levels of Ratzenis. You can want things that are more superficial, like we spoke, or things that are deeper. So Ratzon is considered hispashtus because I need something, I want something, so you're reaching for it, so to speak. You haven't activated yet reaching because Ratzon still has to activate Seichel and Midas to get it done, but at least within you, you wake up one morning and you say, I have a desire for something. And let's talk about, a desire, I really would love to learn Chassidus now. That's a Ratzon. That Ratzon is going to activate things, but that Ratzon is considered to be what he says, a spashtus and gili HaNefesh. How about Einig? What's Einig? Pleasure. The Einig hu b'chinas aliyah v'helam. Einig is the other direction. Einig is the inner contentment that you have that's not expressing itself outward, it's really feeding the soul. So basically, Ratzon is an expression that is like more of hamshacha. That's what we learned earlier, if you may recall. I'll tell you what page in a moment. It's hamshacha, outward. The Ratzon, the desire for something. Einig is the pleasure that you gain from it. And that's more of aliyah, like he calls it, aliyah v'helam. It's not a gilui, an hamshacha, or a spashtus and gilui. It's an aliyah v'helam. It's there, but it's like having that inner pleasure. In other words, in the context of this example, you want to build a home. Okay, so the Ratzon will then go out, so-called, express itself, and then you'll hire or you'll whatever you need to do to help build that home. Fine. But then there's an einig in all of this. There's a deep level of contentment or pleasure or whatever other word you want to use, or delight that a person gains from this home. So even if you don't even have the home yet, you already have an einig from it, especially when you move in and you feel it. So what are you feeling then? That's not necessarily expressed to others. Keep in mind, einig is not simcha. We're not talking about celebrating with others, as the Rambam paskins. Simcha is with others and you celebrate. We're talking about the inner einig that you have. You can be completely alone, not express it to anyone. You just inside feel a profound pleasure. So that's the difference between einig and Ratzon. Now, the fact is we were created with einig and Ratzon to give us a taste of einig and Ratzon Lamaila, which in Keser is Arich and Atik, and even higher, as we're going to learn, is in Lifnei Tzimtzum, the different levels. One is essentially an expressive force, and the other is a more of an inner force. So if you want to describe it as, in a way like, if you remember, legalis lezulose. So when you talk about dibur, even though I don't want to confuse matters, but just as an example, when you're speaking, you're reaching out to someone. You're speaking to someone. When you're learning or thinking on your own, it's more an inner expression. Now, with a big disclaimer that that's in Keiches Geluyim, or even more, that's in garments, even lower. Here, we're talking about within the Keiches Nalomim, there is also similar two levels. One is expressive, like he calls it Haspashtus and Gili, and one is Aliyah and Helam. Where did we learn this earlier? You may recall, he spoke about it. Let's see if I find it quickly. I think it was... I remember by Chochmah and Bini spoke about it on page 1412. But there, he said Bina was Rotze and Chochmah was Shuv. I thought he may have mentioned Taanug and Rotze, maybe not. Okay, it may be a lot earlier. I thought it was on that page. There I know. I now see that's more Chachma and Bina. We spoke a similar type of it, but I think maybe earlier even. He spoke about it by Mamala and Seviv, that Mamala, the contemplation on the divine within existence, awakens a love to reveal godliness within you. The Hizbonenus of Seviv Klalman, that God beyond existence, awakens a love to leave Aliyah Viskalus, to be encompassed in the divine. But I don't think he mentioned there, let me see. Did he mention there, that was on page 1412 as well. One second. Did he mention Ratzon and Taanug? I'm just bothered. I just remember we just learned it a few pages. Here's the Rotzen. Okay, I'll look for it. He doesn't mention Ratzon and Taanug, but it's a similar concept. The difference between drawing down and encompassed upward. So strike it. It's not so relevant. Maybe it is connected to that, but
On
just
1406, he says that Taanug is Pnimis Haratzon.
okay. Let me look.
It's
Is there something?
about 15 lines down, kind of just
Yeah, I
about the
see
middle.
by Atik. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
It's just a side comment. It's not the main point.
No, that's yeah. But that's not what I'm looking more the difference when one is Aliyah V'Helam. Okay, I'll find it. No, he for sure spoke about it earlier in Ayin Beis. I just thought it was closer. Okay, good. So there you have the difference between Ratzon and Taanug, and with that he's going to explain the difference between the oisius of that manifest that express that, and I think it's pretty clear. So I'll just let me read that. Valkain. And being that Taanug is so different than Ratzon in the sense that it's one that's basically it's like receiving. It's more of an inner pleasure within, internal. Alkena Eishis Shem built in the Kodim. Klal. And not at all the Kodim means discernible, but I think here not at all defined yet. Why? Because the Taanug by itself is not a form of, it's not really an outer expression. It's an expression. So there's Asius, but it's more internal. It's similar, so similar. When we said Chachma, he said, and being a Chachma was just a spark of an idea. And the idea is not manifest in a keli yet. That's why we don't comprehend. There's no tfisa. So the same in Koiches Nalam in Ratzon is, by definition, it's an expression that is desire something. That means there's you and what you desire. In Taanug, so as soon as there's you and what you desire, so there's a levush, where there's oasis that have some form of definition. Whereas in Taanug, it's only about you. Yes, the pleasure may be coming from something outside of you, but the experience is a solitary one. So by definition, even though again he doesn't use those words, but if you see similar parallels, the difference in dibur and machshava, bina and chachma, and now ratzon and taanug have something in common. That one is being expressed in some way to another, like dibur, or bina, even if it's to yourself, but you're expressing and understanding it. So there's more kalim, more oasis. When it's something that's more internal, like machshava to yourself, or chachma, which is not yet understood, but you have the concept, the flash, or in this case, taanug, the inner desire, the inner pleasure, not so much the expression. Then the letters obviously become less less defined, less recognized, or in this case, I would say less defined. But you can't say there's no Asius because there's manifestation. Manifestation, by definition, as he says, is Asius asa, because Asius really means expression or manifestation. These are all good words to use to express, to define it, and that's built into Kadam Klal. Okay, so there we have now. Basically, you could say it's 3 stages. It's actually 6 levels, but 3 stages. Machshav, Dibra, Machshav, and Levushim. You have Bina and Chachma, and then you have now Ratzon and Taanug. And with each level higher, the letters become less and less defined and less tangible, as we've been explaining. So let me stop here before I continue, because we're going to continue now to talk about the Keiches. Okay, any questions? The Kvan is ill. Continuing, and we already explained earlier. The Bechlolos ha'esis elolu hein lamayla ma'esis the Keiches agluim. Okay, so he's literally that the Keiches in the Keiches, the letters in the Keiches and Elamim, or these channels of expression, may be the best way to put it, in the Keiches Nalomim, with these letters, Hein Lamaila, are higher than the Oisius and of the Keiches Gluyim. She'ena b'chinas mitzias mamish. Being that the Keiches Nalomim are not a mitzias mamish. Even though they're mitzias because there is a gili, they either desire something, rotzen, or pleasure in something, tainug, but again, you see the word mamish, mitzias mamish. What does that mean? Is it a mitzias or is it not a mitzias? We actually earlier, if you may recall from the Pardes, used the expression ambriya, that you can't say it's yesh, but you can't say it's ayin. So you say it's not yesh yet, but it's also not completely nothing there. Just a similar expression. So here, it's not a mitzias mamish. So the letters are mukol mokum hariyesh shamesius. But nevertheless, even in Rotzen and Taanug and Keiches Nalom, there are asis. There is an expression. It's just not quite like the expression of revealed faculties, which again is obvious. Like he said, l'mayla mekalim. So when someone says chachma or bina, or let's say chesed, gvura, there's a full manifestation, a and a keli, which is definition. When you say the rotzen for chesed, or the taanug that comes from chesed, there you're talking about, yes, they are faculties, but they're hidden faculties, or you can say they're more transcendent faculties, is also a very good word here, not imminent ones. And that's what we call often keiches makifim. Here he uses the word keiches nalamim, because it's obviously fitting more to our discussion here. And therefore, they're aces, but the aces are not are different than the ones that are, in other words, the channels of expression there are different than the ones that are in the revealed faculties. I want to just add something that may help make this a little more palpable, if I may. It's an idea that I share often, which is the big question, that obvious question, that when it comes to communicating, we find, I think I alluded to this a few classes back, we find that when it comes to superficial things, we find many words. I mean, just turn on talk radio. They can talk and talk and talk about nonsense, about real things that, and it's like endless almost. When someone asks you, talk about yourself, talk about your intimate feelings, your inner joy, your inner pain, your inner challenges, you'll find that we find many less words than talking about the weather or sports or business and so on. Question is why? It would seem that you're talking about yourself and your innermost feelings that's you're most familiar with, you should have more words. And when it comes about casual, superficial things, you should have less words. Now, we're not talking about because you're confidential reasons that a person is not comfortable sharing their inner feelings. You'll see even with someone you trust and are comfortable with, it's harder to express. The deeper the feeling, the harder to express it in words. That's why we use the expression, I don't have the right words, I don't have enough, not adequate words, I don't know fully how to say this. You know, the answer is because oisius, like we're learning here, are kalim. They're kalim, they're containers. Containers are measured. So if you want to have a little cup of water and a little cup, or say l'chaim, you don't need it. You need a cup that will hold a little l'chaim, a little wine or mashka. If you want more, you need a bigger cup. But at the end of the day, every cup, every container has limited. So it only can express a limited amount of feelings or thoughts. That's why we've created a language called metaphor, like a poem or a metaphor or even a riddle. They're also letters, but because they're metaphorical, they contain a lot more. We realize there's something more here. I remember when we started first time I learned poetry, I was like so confused. I said, what is this? Why is it so cryptic? Why don't they just write what they want to say? And I remember the teacher, our literature teacher, told us, you'll get older, you'll understand, because it expresses things you can't express in regular language. Absolutely right. It's metaphorical. And it captures a certain spirit between the lines. So you're finding different type of letters that are not quite contained and limited like regular containers. They're more sublime in a way, just like certain words capture a deeper expression than others. So it's not about quantity. It's now you're creating a different type of container to be able to express more. But then there are things that even metaphor is not sufficient. And sometimes just a sigh, or just oy vey, or a laugh can convey more volumes than an entire essay. Why? Because here too, as the energy gets more intense and more intimate, the containers are not able to contain it. So that's why you don't find words or letters. So when it comes to casual, superficial things, we can talk because there's not a lot of air there. As soon as there's more air, the kalim become inadequate. And you need to find other forms of expression. A niggin, for example, a song, suddenly expresses a whole other level. Because again, the containers are very different. They're more sublime. Now to the point, I said like a sigh, just a sigh or a laugh has so much power in it. But then I'll use the expression from the Zohar, there's a kola de lo yishtama. There's an expression of voice that is not heard, an unheard voice. Or like we find in the Pasuk, kol d'mamo daka, a very subtle, ethereal voice. It's the story with Eliyahu Hanavi. He was waiting for the Shekhinah, the divine presence, to appear. And first came a ruach, a wind, and then came a lightning, and then came a thunder, or the other way, first came a rash, first came a thunder, then came a lightning, and then came a...
לא יברש השם ולא בקול, אם בקול דמו מדקו.
Right. So, but ki'im, so even though they're very loud and very pronounced, a lightning, a thunder, a lightning, a voice, one second, yeah, loud voice, but then b'kel d'mama daka. Interesting expression. D'mama means silent or subtle. Daka, subtle, silent voice. In there lies all this power. So what we see from this is that kalim, the more defined they are, the less air they express. And the deeper the air, the more sublime are the kalim. And as I said, when we learned earlier, we talked about concentrating on something that when you're really deeply into it, you don't recognize you don't even notice there's letters, or furthermore, the letters have not yet even fully been defined. I just wanted to use it as an example to help understand how we go higher in the keiches, from keiches gluyim to keiches nelamim. The letters become more sublime and less visible or less discernible or less defined. Okay. With that said, he's now going to move to Etzem HaNefesh. What's with the Etzem HaNefesh, which of course is higher than everything we've learned till now? Because everything we learned is we said Oisius is a gili. Etzem HaNefesh by definition is not a gili. So what's the story with Oisius and Etzem HaNefesh? And this is vital because in the Nimshal, remember we said that Hashem Hayahu Shmei Bulvad, not just who, also Shmei, which is Oisius. And that's before the Nivra Ha'elam, before creation, before existence. So he's going to talk now about Etzem HaNefesh. So he says like this now. Hine Yedua. Now it's known, Sheyesh Eisis HaKfuyim be'Etzem HaNefesh. That there are Eisis that are Kfuyim, that are firmly placed. Kfuyim would be established.
Affixed.
I don't think it would be good to affix here because it's an Etzem HaNefesh. It's not like putting a mezuzah on the door. I'm thinking Kvuyim means here more like a permanent
Place, location.
Permanently, I'll find the right word that he means here. Kvuyim be'etzem HaNefesh. In other words, the way the Etzem HaNefesh was created is that it has oisius in there. What type of oisius we'll discuss. But it's not just, it has oisius that are established within the Etzem HaNefesh.
Situated?
You could say that, yeah. Ukamaimer HaNefesh Meleya oisius. Like it says, the Nefesh is filled with letters. In Ageres HaKedesh, by Yaz David, he speaks about that. A Nefesh Meleya oisius. So now the question is, how do we know this? Maybe he doesn't have oisius. I'm not questioning what the Rebbe Rashab is saying or what he's citing, but you could argue maybe Oisius only begin when the nefesh starts expressing itself, whether it's Taanug or Ratzon and so on. But that's what it says. That, in other words, we're born with letters in our Etzem HaNefesh. Now, letters obviously doesn't necessarily mean Aleph, Beis, Gimel, like I said. It means channels of expression. There is something in the Etzem HaNefesh that relates to Oisius. He's going to explain what that means. So let's just read inside and then we'll discuss it. Hagam she'ena margish klal sheyesh Oisius b'nefesh, even though we don't feel at all any Oisius in nefesh, even with Taanug, he said eina murgashim or eina nekarin. But at the end of the day, someone will say, "What is your pleasure like?" So not that you have to express it to anyone, but let's say you do want to express. You say, "I have deep pleasure for my children. Just seeing them gives me deep pleasure." So right there, not just that you said it in words, that's not my point. It means that Taanug is not completely non-defined. It's just that letters are not that visible and not that critical, because the main power, like he says, is the oyer, not the keli. But it's not that there isn't Oisius. So you could understand that Taanug has some parameters. However, it's not like the parameters of speech or thought or the lower levels that we talked about. But when Etzem HaNefesh, you're not margish at all any letters. What like someone will say, what is the Etzem HaNefesh like? There's no real answer to that. There's no definition to that. I'm just explaining it one way. There's many ways to explain it. So he says, "Ein margish klal sheyesh Oisius mev mikol mokem behechlech leimer shebe'etzem HaNefesh yesh Oisius." Nevertheless, we have to say that there are letters in the Etzem HaNefesh. And he's going to prove that now. He's going to give us a proof. The im leikein, because if that's not the case, if there are no letters, ma'ayin heina Oisius shebakeches. So where did the letters come from of expression in the faculties? Where did they suddenly get the power to express themselves? He's going to obviously explain what that means, because you could answer that in many ways. So in other words, if we see that we have that we talked the other day, what would the Etzem be without any koiches? The Etzem would just be intact without any need for expression, and that's that. I mean, I don't want to give it an example, but let's say, think of a stone, just a plain daimon, a mineral. It doesn't need to express itself, even though it has a nefesh hadememes, as the Rizal says, but it's not expressive. It doesn't grow like a plant. It doesn't move about like an animal, and doesn't think or conceive or all the other qualities of a human being, of a medaber. I don't want to compare, obviously, an Etzem HaNefesh to a stone, but just as a distant example of something that is just there, and that's it. So if you see expression, where the channels of expression, where do they originate from? Did they originate after the Etzem HaNefesh? In other words, the Etzem HaNefesh is in one place, and then comes something else that God created the ability to express. He says you can't say that. Now, why can't you say that? So he's going to say like this: Ayin Beis, the im nemar, because if you're going to say that the expression of letters are created with the revelation of the faculties. In other words, the Etzem HaNefesh is here. When a koyach begins to express itself, it comes together with the tools of expression, which is called Oisius. So in other words, they're not originating in the nefesh, they're originating in the ability to, just as the koyach, just like we have faculties, the faculty of sight or sound, or the faculty of chokhmah bina, or the faculties of Ratzon and Taanug, together with each faculty comes a set of tools called Oisius, so to speak. So the Mesave with his Galus HaKoiches. And the Etzem HaNefesh is removed from that, which would then go back to the original question: how do we know there's letters in the Nefesh? It says if you say that they're Mesave that they're formed, and they come into being with the revelation of the faculties. So he says like this: if that's which means with the what are called the gutturals, Meitzois hapeh is the five. I think that there's 5 Meitzayos HaPeh. What is the expression for Meitzayos? Like for example, the difference between the lips, the tongue, the upper palate, the throat, and the teeth. When different letters, like for example, aleph, is with the throat. For example, like a ches, you need aleph. I'm sorry, is with ches.
We can say obstacles. We can say obstacles for
They're not
the.
obstacles. No, they're not obstacles. No, for sure
They
not.
are obstacle for the
You
breast.
can say it in
to go.
Russian, but it's not obstacles. It's not in English. Obstacles means something else completely. There's an expression. I think it's the 5 gutturals. Look it up. Hey Meitzayos HaPeh, the Meitzayos. In other words, it's something like this. Think of it this way. When you, let's say, use a flute, right? A flute. If you blow through a flute without touching the holes, so to speak, it'll just give you out a plain sound like a shofar. But when you touch the holes, you can change the sounds. So with these 5, I think they're called gutturals, if I'm correct. What they do is they're giving shape and form to letters. So he's saying basically that the letters are not coming from the original place, the soul. They're coming when the koyach gets revealed. It comes along with these different inflections, which is called the meitzayos. His gasser koyach ba meitzayos. In the way they're expressed. If that's the case, that these channels of expression, these letters come after, below the Etzem HaNefesh, they come together with the expression of the faculties, so it should take time. It should take time how to move around these meitzayos, these forces that shape the sound, in order for these asias to be formed. So we're talking here obviously speech. So if the letters of speech are formed only when a person starts speaking, then it should take time, and take time till he gets used to it. Because where else are they coming from? Where are these letters coming from? How does the koyach know to use these letters of expression? So you would need time, and you need training, basically. Now we understand a person starts speaking, it does take time till you full speak, but it's so quick. If you think about it, it's pretty miraculous how fast a child learns to speak. So therefore he's saying, let me continue the development of this proof before we, as I said, analyze it. Ve'im nemar shezeh ma'geluim da'keiches atzmon. Well, you could say, you know what? The isis are not coming from somewhere that you need training. They're coming from the very faculties themselves. V'ameitzois, which is these gutturals that are hein rak shebehem nasim b'bchinas mitzias. They're only there to give them substance, but it's not coming. In other words, the meitzayos are just there to shape it, so to speak, to direct the flow. Like I said before, the flow is coming from the expression from the faculties. It's the meitzayos that only give it direction, so to speak, and give it shape and form. Shekenu ha'emes, which is true. When you speak, the fact that you have the lips and the tongue and the palate and the throat and the teeth, they're only giving shape to the letters. They're not creating the letters. So if you say that's the case, so it's coming from the koiches themselves. In other words, when you express an idea or you express an emotion, it has letters within it. However, the different parts of your mouth, the 5 different so-called gutturals, again, I don't know if that's the right word, but if there's
They're called articulators. The gutturals are just from the throat.
Okay, so my mistake. So the 5 articulators is the right word?
It's the best word in English, yes.
Okay. So we say, like I said, in Hebrew, there are like gimel. Gimel requires, I believe, what's the gimel, yud, chaf, and kuf is one group. Aleph, ches, hey, ayin is another group. Mem, nun. Anyway, there's 5 different groups of letters And you see, if God forbid, one of the articulators is damaged, you'll see you're going to be hard to pronounce certain words or certain letters. So what they do
You
is
have
just
base, Vav, Mem, Pei is also group.
Beis Vav Mem
Base,
Pei,
Vav,
right?
Mem,
Beis,
Pei.
that's the lips. Beis Vav Mem Pei is the lips, and the others, each one. I look it up, but bottom line is these articulators. That's a good word. All they're doing they're like channels. I think of them like funnels. They're channels that when you breathe and you want to express yourself and you have breath, then they will travel through these different things, these different ways to express yourself. It's quite fascinating, actually, to study how speech develops. So he's saying like this so far. Let's just go back to what he said so far. He's trying to prove that the Isis have to come from Etzem HaNefesh, because if not, where do they come from? So he begins. Maybe they come from, once you start expressing yourself, they come along. Like he says. But if that's the case, it would take time, he says. It takes time till you learn how to express different letters and so on, and you need to train. So he says, and if you say that they're coming from the Giluyim of the Koich itself, in other words, the power of expression is coming from the faculties, and the Meitzahs, the articulators, are just giving it direction, so-called shape and form, Hine. He says, if that's the case, here's the problem. Two problems, one in the parentheses and one outside the parentheses. Besides the question that would pose, the problem that would pose would be, where do the Giluyim have this if it's not in the Makar? Since the Makar of all the faculties, Etzem HaNefesh, where do the Giluyim, meaning the Koiches, have the power to suddenly come up with these instruments, the expression? That's one issue. But the Levadjes, im kein hayitzorich li seichel, hayitzorich li shekol oyer yila esis hashayochim el hagilui. If that's the case, then every oyer should have particular letters or expression that are related to that particular revelation. Because it's coming together with the expression of that faculty, or whatever that idea that you're expressing should have particular aces. But we see that's not the case. One one idea can be expressed in many different letters, in different ways. If it's coming from the faculty's expression, then it should have one way it expresses itself, and that's it. The fact that it has different ways, different aces, like in the Gemara, the Mefarshim, the Shem, Teisrus, Reish, and Ran. These are three primary commentators on Talmud. So we know, She'emrim Seichel Echad, often they say a similar idea, Ube'esis Achedim, but they express it in different letters, in different words. See, and you see that. You can see one idea, you can express one way, I express it a different way, even though it's the same idea. So he's saying, if it's coming from the idea, and not from its source, from the Etzem HaNefesh, then it should only have one set of letters and words that express it, and you shouldn't be able to express it in many different ways, because it's coming with that gili. In other words, it's coming from that very, very gili. So you have to say, this is his conclusion. As I said, we'll analyze this and we'll discuss it and dissect it, but let's just finish reading. Ella. So you must say that the letters originate in the Etzem HaNefesh prior to the expression of prior to any faculties. And when the faculties reveal themselves and express themselves, that's when those letters are revealed. Then, just as the faculties are defining and expressing themselves in a certain way, also the aces that they use to express themselves come together with that gili, but it's not originating from them. They're drawing from the Etzem HaNefesh. So just like the koiches come from the Etzem HaNefesh, and they're not self-made, so too the gili, the way they express themselves, the channels of expression, their aces also come from the Etzem HaNefesh, but it's revealed through the faculties. That's how he explains the Etzem HaNefesh.
I think
Ulechein.
Tanya is
Ulechein. Kol echad ve'echad oimer hasechel be'esis acherim. That's why we find that the Tosfos, the Resh and the Ran, or others, each one expresses it with his own words, different words, because each one is according to the esis of their nefesh. Everyone has a different way of expressing it. It's not coming from the very idea, it's coming from the nefesh that precedes the idea. In this case, same thing with the expression of emotions. But the ikran, meaning the primary place and the primary source for all letters of expression, are not outside of the Etzem HaNefesh. They all originate in Etzem HaNefesh, except they're completely not recognizable. You can't feel them. They're not discernible. They're not defined. But that's where they originate from. Now, I have a lot of questions on what the Rebbe Rashab just said to understand it. Like, why didn't he just say very simple? Just like the koiches don't create themselves, they come from the Etzem HaNefesh, so does their expression come from the Etzem HaNefesh. But he goes a whole roundabout way. It could be that is what he's ultimately saying, but he's saying it with a lot more elaboration. So we need to break this down and understand it well. But the point, let's just get to the punchline is that the oisis don't originate outside of the Etzem HaNefesh. They're nefesh meleya oisis. The nefesh is filled with letters, or you could say with channels of expression. I would even call it the power of expression. And then when the faculties begin to emerge, whether it's Taanug, Ratzon, or the koiches gluyim, seich lamidas, that's when those channels of expression are revealed. But they don't originate in the koiches, they originate prior to that, for the reasons he just explained. That's what he just said. If you read further, he brings another proof. He says, V'raya lezeh, a proof for this. Let's just read this proof, and then we can go back and try to understand the details there. It says, Shari ha'ulam, ha'olen, a person who is ha'ilam, which means a mute person, a person who cannot speak, gives birth to someone that could speak. What does that tell you? But the mute person doesn't have in the Giluyim any letters. He can't speak. So how is it possible that he can give birth to someone that could speak? Because the problem that he has is only in his keiches, in his Giluyim, whether it's in his literal or the organ of the mouth or the nerves that connect or whatever it may be. But his Etzem HaNefesh still has Eisius. Because the letters originate in Etzem HaNefesh, and that has not been affected by his handicap, by his disability. Harihu Meilit Sholem. That's why he gives birth to someone that could speak. Let me just finish already till the end here. Let's just get the whole statement, the whole discussion here spelled out. He talks about that in the first mimer in Ranat. Tofresh Nun Tes is a hemshich of the Rebbe Rashab, earlier hemshich. And this is what the pasuk says when Adam was created. Adam, that the human being will be a living soul. Says the Targum Onkelos. The Targum Onkelos, l'ruach memalola, a spirit that speaks. He defines a living soul as a speaking entity. In other words, the human being was created, the nefesh itself, nefesh chaya, he's translating as a speaker, as a person who can speak. So in other words, speech and letters is not something that is an additional element. That's what defines a nefesh chaya. And that's why the soul is called, a spirit is called a speaking spirit. Al shema esis hakfuim benefesh. Based on the letters that are, we say, situated, that are established, that are firmly implanted in the nefesh. Rak ha'esis shebenefesh ein b'chinas mitzias klal u'klal. The only thing is, the way the letters, or these forms of expression, power of expression is in the nefesh, It's not at all a mitzias at all. He says klal u'klal now, even more than mamish. Klal u'klal, unequivocally, there's no mitzias, no substance. Ulechein einam yeduin klal, and that's why we don't perceive them at all. Mipnei she'einam mitzias klal, because they're not in any way of form of create existence. It's similar to what I described, like one cell. What is a child like in that one cell upon conception? Is it a mitzias? Here it's probably even more than that, because there at least there's a cell. Here you're talking about Etzem HaNefesh, so there's oisies there, the power of expression, but they're not a mitzias at all. Ulechein gamkein Etzem HaNefesh eina nirgash. And the truth is the same as with Etzem HaNefesh itself. It's also not sensed or felt. When you say you feel that you're alive, you're already feeling a gilui of life. You know, that you're walking, you're breathing, your heart is beating, etc. And that's why the Etzem HaNefesh is also, we don't feel the Etzem HaNefesh. We just understand that it has to be there because it's the root of everything. Because the letters within it, or the form, the channels of expression within it, are not a mitzias. So therefore, if they're not a mitzias, the concept of, so it's the power of expression without actual expression, basically. Is another way to put it, the way I would explain it. That it has the power of expression is in the Etzem HaNefesh. That means Eisis are there, but they're not in any expressed way defined, or in any other way that you can call them actual expression. So it's somewhat like we talked about Yechelis Ha'atzmus, his ability to express himself, the capacity to express, which we'll soon see how he parallels that Lamaila. Okay, with that we finish the paragraph. And I am sure that we need to analyze. I think if you cut through all the details, it comes down to the fact that oisius are not like tools. For example, if someone were to say to you, the Etzem HaNefesh has within it a hammer and a screwdriver, or even the koiches have that. No, we don't. A human body has faculties. If you want to dig a pit, or you want to knock a nail into a wall, it's not going to help your faculty. You need the faculty, and you need an outside instrument. So the question is, are oisius like that? Are they like an outside instrument outside of the Etzem HaNefesh? And his answer is no. Because if they were, the first point he made, it would take time to develop that. Even if you were to say the koiches have that within them, the power to be like expressive entities. So he said two things. One is, where do they get that from? If it's not in their source, meaning the Etzem HaNefesh. And two, outside the parentheses, then they should have only one defined way to express themselves. The fact that you can have an idea express itself in many ways means it's not bound by these letters. It could express itself in different ways. So all that compels us to say that the letters precede the koiches, meaning in the Etzem HaNefesh, and just like the Etzem HaNefesh has the power to manifest in faculties, it also gives it the power to express itself in the letters. So in other words, the koiches are like the oiris coming from the Etzem HaNefesh, and the oisis are like the kelim coming from the Etzem HaNefesh. But the kelim are not coming from a lower level, they're all coming from the core. But in the core, they're all not a mitzias yet. Just like the faculties are not a mitzias in the Etzem HaNefesh, so is their oisis, their kelim, their forms of expression are not. That's the simplest way I would explain what he just said. But I'm happy to hear any other people's input or anything you'd like to say.
Did you just come up with that metaphor, or is that it? Because that's beautiful, and it seems like it's the most reduced form of Oros and Kalim that I've heard, like at the core of the core, other than, of course, the Eibishter, but within humans. I mean, that's a really nice way of explaining it.
I think I actually explained it that way a few years ago when we learned it the first time, if I recall correctly. I didn't come up with it the same. I mean, I'm familiar with, I use that in other contexts, but it works here, yeah. I still have some nuances that I'd like to really dissect more. I don't know if we have to go into it in depth, but let's see how everybody took all this. Bottom line is, so we find that oisius originate all the way in the Etzem HaNefesh, but they don't take on any shape or form until there's an expression, basically.
Rabbi Rajab, I have a question. I'm sorry.
One at a time. George, go ahead.
The Alter Rebbe is talking about
George is speaking. Rab Shlomo, let George say, then we'll wait.
the
Go ahead.
Alter Rebbe.
I just asked, George began speaking. I'm asking you to just give him a moment.
It's okay. I have a
Go
question.
ahead.
I have a question. I studied a mimer. It was from Baal Shem Tov, and it was called the Lehavin Kavanas Shofar, that talks about the simple sound of the shofar. And the ultimate punchline of that is that all the sounds ultimately come down to the letter Aleph. So everything else is basically like the articulation or expression of the letter Aleph. Does that idea tie it into this or not really?
It has some connection because Aleph is like the first. Every sound has to start from somewhere. So Aleph
Correct.
is like the you need to begin.
Correct.
With someone. So it's not. I wouldn't say it's directly connected. It's just part of the conversation of how language is formed.
Okay.
But I don't think it changes what he wants. Here he wants to speak about, like I said, where the letters originate from and so on.
You've studied that
I'm sure
mimer,
there's
right?
there may be some lines in that mimer. I'm familiar with the mimer.
Yeah.
It's a very famous mimer. There's some ideas there that may help understand this. I'd have to look it up. But I don't see a direct correlation right now.
Okay, thank you.
There is very subtle location of Etzem HaNefesh with a dibur in a temple, because as you said, every faculty has a particular place. We know that the speech and everything what is about the speech is in the temple of the brain, and that's how we can distinguish the speech from that point, and how we can start to articulate the words. And as you said, the Etzem HaNefesh is reveal itself in every faculty distinctly, but about the speech, it didn't distinctly reveal itself, but it's located in the temple of the head, I mean.
I'm not really clear what you're saying, but okay, fine.
The Alter Rebbe is
okay.
The Alter Rebbe is talking about it in the Geras HaKodesh, I think. Geras
I said Vayas David.
Yeah, Vayas David.
I mentioned it before. Yeah. Are there any other comments, questions, anything else anybody wants to weigh in here?
For me, it's understandable why boys are grown the hair from the paces. Paces, we used to pay attention on the paces of the boy. They are exactly located at the temple. And that might be.
I don't understand why you're bringing the temple. What's connected to what we're discussing here? What does the temple have to do with this?
It's a place, it's a location of the speech in the brain.
Okay, but he's not talking about that here. It's not discussed that here at all.
But Etzem HaNefesh, subtle.
Who says the temple is a very particular place? Who says that's connected to Etzem HaNefesh?
Because we know that where the speech come from, because when the temple is damaged, everybody knows.
But that's a particular location. Etzem HaNefesh is a lot more than the temple.
Yes, as it is in the eyes, in the nose, in the ears, the same is about the faculty of speech.
I understand, but the temple is not Etzem HaNefesh, is what I'm trying to say.
No, it's just the place.
Okay, fine.
I have a question that keeps coming up in my mind. How we are, in a sense, the Eibishter made us this way. He made our neshamas this way, and nefesh hamedaberes. But the Eibishter like Osios did not pre-exist the Abishter. Like he created Osios. So I'm trying to understand, like in some sense, we're creative Tselem Elokim. So there's something about our ability to speak, to express, that is divine in nature. No other creature can do it. And so I'm trying to understand what would be the corollary in the Abishter for whom these are not, they did the Oisios do not pre-exist him, obviously. So it's interesting. These Oisios are embedded in our Etzem and HaNefesh. He built us this way, but we're also created in his image. So it's like this very subtle distinction.
No,
And
there
I'm
isn't
trying.
it's very straightforward. It's created in God's image. I right away tells you it's not the etzem of God because God has no image. The very fact that you say created in his image means already how God chose to manifest in Atzilus, in Adam Elyon, in what we would call a structure, spheres, 10 spheres, and faculties, and even higher than all the way. So it doesn't say anywhere that man is God. It says that God manifests himself in certain levels and then created a divine entity and a human being with a neshama that he himself instilled that is in divine image. So not everything in Atzmus necessarily is reflected in us, and not everything of us is reflected in Atzmus.
Okay, so you wouldn't even try and draw a corollary or a connection.
No, some things yes, and some things not. We will soon see the next page. He's going to now make a corollary between all these levels and how we contemplate in Hashem Echad, because God created the world with letters.
Right. I know he's headed there. That's why I'm trying to.
But you say Hayahu Ushmoy Bilvad. Shmoy are letters. It doesn't say who is letters.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, I know that's where we're headed. So I was trying to do some derivations here, but I guess it's doesn't necessarily follow.
No, we'll see. We're going to see exactly how it follows. He's gonna. This is what the Rebbe Rashab is leading us to. He wants to use now the human being as I guess you could say a mirror image or a somewhat of a parallel to help us understand now how it works with Hashem. That's the next. Look at the next line.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. All right, so I don't have to wait long to get to see where this how the correlation works.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The few things that remain to me a bit that need explanation, to be honest, is one, I don't fully understand the proof, because the seichel can be expressed by different people in different letters, with different words. That means that the words are not coming from the very seichel, it's coming from something beyond, higher. So I think when you say it, it makes sense. It makes sense. Because if that's the case, if the words are so-called embedded in the seichel, then the words should be, this is the words for this seichel, and you can't explain it any other way. The mere fact that the oir of the seichel can have different kelim tells you the kelim are not coming from the oir. I'm just talking it through. That's probably what he means here. That's why the Rosh, the Tosfos, Rosh and Ran, can take the same oir and explain it in different ways. It's like playing the same. It's like same musical notes, but three different musicians have different renditions of it. I don't know if that's a good example, because the notes are the same.
Well, what I was trying to get at is the power to create.
No, I'm talking to myself right now. I was not addressing what you had said.
No, I know, but I just wanted to.
Listen, let me just finish my thoughts here.
Sorry, I apologize.
The second thing, what he said about being trained, that if he said is mesamai des galos hakeches b'amitzayis, if you say the letters did not precede the keches, meaning that they come when the keches are revealed in the mitzvahs and the articulators, so then it should take time for the movements to take hold. The fact that it comes so natural for us to speak without any training, even though, yes, a child has to take time till they fully can speak, but it doesn't take a lot of training. It's not like years and years of training in so many other areas. Like when you train someone to be a surgeon or or whatever, a lawyer, it needs years of training. Why? Because they don't have law and surgery in their Etzem HaNefesh. But since the Aces are there, that's why it comes so easily and naturally. I think that's what he's saying with that piece. If it only comes through this Galus HaKeiches, then it should take time and that. Again, I'm just elaborating a bit to understand better what he's saying. Okay.
It should take time by an average person. When you want to say something, right away you're saying it. Doesn't take even a second. So that means that it's not coming from that.
Correct. But I'm speaking also when you begin, because, for example, music, it could take years to train someone to play music, but then it comes natural to them. Then they just sit down by a piano or a guitar, or they just start singing. It also comes natural, but they did have a training till they got there. I'm not talking about natural singing. I'm talking about, the art. Okay, I think that's clear. Anyway, go ahead.
This is why we should compare Dibur with vision, hearing, all other faculties that when we're born are already doesn't need to be developed. That's how I see Dibur. The capacity for speech is as a faculty, like eyesight, ears.
Yeah, that's why I said before, just like the faculties come from the Etzem HaNefesh.
Yes.
The power of expression comes from the Etzem HaNefesh.
Yes, a little bit more concealed, but that's why we can use them right away. As I said, it has specific location, and for me, it's a revelation why pious are used to grow from this place.
Okay. So we finished the page and paragraph at the bottom of page 1418.